Yo, what's up? Oh, you backed out that fast. All right.
Media outlets including CBS News, NPR's Code Switch podcast, and the Freedom Forum Religion Foundation's Free Thought radio program. She has been profiled in publications including Jet Magazine and Playboy, and has written opinion pieces for outlets including CNN. Mandisa founded Black Nonbelievers Incorporated in 2011 as a nonprofit secular fellowship. Its goals include eliminating stigma, increasing visibility, and providing support and networking opportunities around non-belief in the African American community. The organization's leadership is mostly female and includes LGBTQ representation, and it has affiliates in 10 U.S. cities. Ladies and gentlemen, Andy.
Good evening, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here, and thank you to Tom for his wonderful presentation. Thank you also to the Jacksonville, Georgia, for inviting me. Thank you to everyone in this room, and also everyone who's watching online. Can't forget about y'all. Thank you. So I absolutely love getting the backstory to the title of this talk. I am originally a New York City native, for those of you who aren't aware. And in addition to my having a pretty secular background, which is pretty uncommon, I'm also a huge hip-hop fan. How many of my hip-hop heads are there? Any hip-hop heads in the house? Good, good. So I might be dating myself a little bit. And I originally, the concept for this talk started in 2017 with the faculty advisor of the Sacramento City College's Secular Student Alliance group. And so as we were crafting this presentation and the tour that I did, I came up with some titles. And one was based on how many of you heard Public Enemy? Yes, good. So you know they have an album called Fear of a Black Planet. So the title of this talk is Fear of a Black Atheist. You may have seen it before, but I do tend to give variations of this talk every time I give it. So it's always good to see it in person, see it live. And it was so pertinent for a number of reasons, because one, given our current times, given our current climate, it does seem like not only the United States, but the world does have a fear of a black planet. But also, too, with the rising number of the non-religious, and also the work that we have to do within our own community, there seems to have been a fear of black atheists. And so with that, we're going to get right into it. First, again, just a bit more about myself. I am the founder and president of Black Non-Believers, born and raised in New York City. I was raised in what was called the Black conscious community, which is another reason why Public Enemy is, and their music and their message was so powerful.
All right, about to get some paints on this canvas. And I think I can wrap this commission up right here in just a few brush strokes, maybe. I just want to fill in the background a little bit, and then I think I'll be done with this.
I was working full-time at the Center for Disease Control as the event service manager. I transitioned to full-time activism going on 3 years ago now. And in addition to my work with Black Non-Believers, I also currently serve on the boards for American
All right, I'm getting some blue, some green,
I also volunteer with Recovering from
some
Religion.
brown.
And while I did not get into this movement for awards and accolades, I am proud to say that I was named the Unitarian Universalist Humanist Association's Person of the Year in 2018. I was the recipient of the Secular Student Alliance's Backbone Award in 2019. I was also named the Freedom from Religion Foundation's Free Thought Heroine that year. And last year, I was the co-recipient of the 2020 Harvard Humanist of the Year Award, along with Sikibu Hutchinson. If you're not familiar with her, I highly recommend that you become more familiar. And also author Ijoma Oluwa. And this is important because, again, people often ask, well, why stress Black atheists? Why do we need to talk about, why do we need to differentiate, or why does there need to? So first, I want to say that we do exist. There are those of us here from the Black community who actually openly identify as atheists, or who have questioned their beliefs through evidence and through their experiences, and who have left religion behind. And while we are still smaller in number, we are growing, and you can see it represented in this room. Not as much as what some would like to, but yes, we do exist. And I do want to quote from a Playboy article from 2018. This was a gentleman who was a former pastor. He attended his first convention in Oklahoma City, which was the American Atheist Convention that year. And to quote from the July-August 2018 article, Among the Atheists, he said, "The most encouraging moment of that convention weekend comes when I introduced myself to Mandisa Thomas, president and founder of Black Non-Believers, an organization dedicated to support and visibility for Black atheists." So now we're going to go back into why this is important, because it is. Excuse me. So in order to understand why the focus on Black atheists and also other atheists of color is important, we have to understand why religion defines the Black community. And it goes back to because the numbers support this. Approximately 79% of the Black community, and I think those numbers are probably higher, identify as religious. Now we are talking about the Black community making up 12%, approximately 12% of the US population. The number of religiously identified is about 80%, which is disproportionately high, even though the number of religious nuns are rising. And this is due to, when we talk about survival, Tom talked about survival in his presentation. Slavery in the United States of our African ancestors pretty much forced the enslaved to accept Christianity in particular. And it was more of, if you didn't accept it, you died. So, and most of the major religions, the Judeo-Christian religions, why they are so prevalent is because that is the primary way they were forced. So it wasn't because they had their own traditional beliefs, but they were forced, in addition to accepting, the oppression, accepting the oppression, but that was an aspect of having to endure the enslavement in this country. So we have to, and that is very, very important to understanding why there is a higher number of religiously identified Black folks, especially in the United States. But even though this was the case, the Black church, which in areas like Macon, Georgia, is probably very powerful, it became a primary sense of support once slavery ended and institutionalized racism was enacted and enforced. There were a huge number of historically Black colleges and universities that were founded through churches. And so, yes, there was a foundational support with the Black community, especially once Jim Crow laws were started, and also once many in the Black community were disfranchised through terrorist groups like the Ku Klux Klan, especially here in the South. So the church became that sense of support for a lot of people. However, with this knowledge and with this understanding as to why the church and religion in particular is extremely prevalent within the Black community, we do contend that it has been a crippling agent. Now, I personally am anti-religion. I'm very much anti-religion because, and you can go to Pew Research to verify these numbers. But we contend that religion has crippled our community, and we are in the midst of Black History Month, right? Just started. And so religion and Christianity, the identity, has hijacked the image and the representation of the Black community. How many of you are familiar with Dr. Carter G. Woodson? Okay. Only one person. And this is why this talk is so important. So Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who is a Harvard graduate, he was an African-American historian during the time of the Harlem Renaissance. He famously wrote the book, The Miseducation of the Negro. He is the founder of Negro History Week, which became Black History Month in the 1970s. The fact, especially coming from the Black community, because the concept of free thought, humanism, and atheism is nothing new to us. We've had these same questions, compared and contrasted the evidence. However, when it comes to the culture of our community, these bits of information and the trajectory is often obscured and even dismissed. So there is, and this isn't just important to Black history, it's important to American history. So when we talk about the miseducation of a lot of folks, there are many who have been. And also, it ignores how Blacks became predominantly Christian in the first place. Like I said, it wasn't because people wanted to accept it, and it really does. We charge religion and Christianity with being the primary agent of white supremacy. This is something that we cannot ignore. And when we talk about racial injustice, we talk about economic injustice and how the Black community who's borne the brunt of that, we cannot ignore this. And it severely diminishes the critical thinking process and reinforces dependence on a savior and a divine entity, which is a problem. So even though there were humans, there have always been humans that have fought against injustice, there have been many, especially within the Black community, who have just put it in the hands of God and who have just prayed about it and who said that a savior is going to come for us. And this has been a problem for us. And we have to speak on it. It also perpetuates homophobia, sexism, hypocrisy, etc., etc. Black women make up the majority of membership in the Black church. But as we know, religion and Christianity in particular and the other Judeo-Christian religions are very, very, very anti-woman. They are very, very anti-LGBTQ. And this has played a huge role in the problems that we have within the Black community. It also overlooks abusive acts that are committed by religious people and their leaders. We can certainly look to the Catholic Church for this, but we can also look no further than to the late Bishop Eddie Long up there in Atlanta, DeKalb County, who was the former bishop of New Birth Missionary Baptist Church. Now, he came under fire for carrying on inappropriate relations with young men in his church. Ironically, though, he, a few years before that, he actually led a march protesting same-sex marriage and same-sex relationships. And what did his parishioners do? Even though there was talk, there was critique, they still forgave him because why? He's a male God. Even though he sufficiently committed harm against these young men. And again, the people who are harmed by these people's actions, this should not be ignored. Also, it takes money from the community but doesn't sufficiently give it back. I said before that the Black church is a very, very powerful institution. There are reports that the Black church collectively has generated over $400 billion, which makes it one of the wealthiest institutions within the Black community. Now, granted, again, we give the credit to some religious institutions for starting, educational institutions, and yes, we can give some credit to the church for establishing community, but at what cost? Because as we look at health statistics, as we look at economic statistics, the black community is still on a very low end. And with the church generating that much power and that much money, we have a serious problem. And so this is something that, again, we have to speak on. And it also keeps people in fear and isolation and seeking help and solutions that are needed. It is only as of recently that the Black church has started addressing sufficiently the issues of HIV and AIDS and of health disparities, also mental health. Oftentimes people are, again, told to pray on it. You know, you got demons in you, instead of sufficiently seeking clinical help and actually seeking solutions that could benefit our communities. The church does not have the monopoly on fellowship. They do not have the monopoly on any of these things that could benefit us. But they certainly like to take credit for that. And also, too, if you are a person of color, and if you are certainly social black, there was I'm not sure if you saw, there's a video available of a black woman stating that she could not believe that I, as a black woman, had the nerve to identify as atheist in front of white devils. Yeah, let that sink in. So not only do you have your beliefs questioned and your perspectives questioned, for many of us, we have our black identities questioned. And let me tell you, we may be able to hide our atheism, we may be able to, we don't always have to disclose that, but we can't hide the fact that we're black at all. And so to have those identities questioned based on misunderstandings of atheism and non-belief in humanism, that adds extra added layers that some of you folks in this room will never have to go through. That adds extra added challenges, and also in understanding the other institutional factors that people of color and other marginalized groups have to go through. That makes it that much more of a challenge for us. But guess what? I wasn't raised to bury my head in the sand. I was raised as an activist. So therefore, it was in that spirit, for lack of a better word, and in coming to terms with my atheism, and also having other people confide in me that, guess what, they didn't believe either. And also, after attending an atheist meetup within the Atlanta area, and facing a number of challenges, being one of the only other black people in the room, we decided to start Black Non-Believers. And as you can see here, we are celebrating our 10th year in existence this year. Thank you. So we aren't just an organization that sits around and just say, hey, we're here as Black Atheists, we exist. I am an organizer, not just at my heart, but what I do. So, like many other organizations and many other groups, we do help bring people together, because guess what? I can tell you more often than not that I have had a number of people come to me and say, I thought I was the only Black atheist out there. I thought I was the only one who existed, and I'm glad I'm not alone. And I know that many of us as atheists in general feel that. So there was a need to build community among us, and also providing that space for those who understood specifically what it was like to come out of religious belief, and also to face that being in the midst of the Black community. And so while we host a number of activities. We host social events, we have guest speakers, but in addition to that, we have also
yeah, I can show other trainings I've done.
And content, building of content
you can easily go on my Instagram. If you look at my caption bar or the info bar at the bottom of the screen, Paintings by the Prince. You can go on my Instagram and check out a bunch of my art. My studio right here is filled with art, but it'll be another few minutes before I pull my camera back. I'm actually working on a commission right now, so this isn't like my own art. Someone is paying me to do this painting for them. I'll definitely show you some examples of my own art if you're interested. Ugh.
Black age demographic that more people need to be aware of. So, for example, how many of you are familiar, have ever heard of Candace Storm? Okay, so if you aren't familiar with her, she is the author of the Ebony Exodus Project, which debuted in 2013, which discusses why some Black women are walking out on religion. She compiled a number of stories, mine included, and also research into religion in the Black community, the toll and effect it takes on mental health, and also why it is that much harder for more Black women to leave the church. So I highly recommend getting that book. It is available on Amazon Prime. I usually give this presentation with a PowerPoint because I like visuals. I don't just like to tell you. I don't like you to just take my word for it. I actually like to show what I'm speaking of. But also, in addition to us holding and building up our community base to help more people find each other, to increase that networking base, we have, as stated in the introduction, we have done interviews and appearances on a number of media outlets, which for some of our members initially was almost deathly terrified of that. Because like many other atheists, there are quite a few who are in that closet. They were afraid to speak up and say something publicly. However, when you have such an overwhelming presence of religion within Black culture, which it is, and there is a fundamental misunderstanding of atheism and non-belief, it became more important for us to speak up. And so that's what we've been doing. We have been profiled by CNN, by CBS Sunday Morning, by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and a number of major media outlets, and also small ones as well, because it became important for more people to see us. Not just within the Black community, but also within the secular community, because it's always a question of where are all the Black atheists, right? So it became important for us as an organization to help bring more of us together, to tell our stories, and also contribute to the evidence and research that we know is out there. So we are more than just an organization that, some of us come together, we commiserate, we talk about what we go through, but it also extends beyond that. And so some of our current and also previous programs and initiatives, I'm proud to say that over the years, we have collaborated with a number of organizations, but last year, we launched our very first billboard campaign, which we call the True Liberation Billboard Campaign. And we have bumper stickers that show the message is simply free yourself from religion and find true liberation. We also instituted our Being Changes Lives campaign in 2017 because over the years of building up community and connecting with folks, we have had members who have stated not only has our organization changed their lives, but we have also saved them. Now again, I don't have a savior complex. I'm not a messiah. I'm not here to save the world. But if just 1 to 2 people, or if our members feel like their lives have been changed by our existence and also the community we provide, then we'll take it. And so we started collecting testimonies, for lack of a better word. It isn't a religious word. But we've had some folks who have expressed they've talked about their journeys out of leaving religion, also funding our organization and how it has been beneficial to them. And in addition to that, last year we also co-sponsored the very first Zora Neale Hurston Scholarship along with the Secular Student Alliance, which does benefit Black college students. So we do make sure that we try to pay it forward for those who are coming after us. We also do try to develop a leadership pipeline and also a speaker pipeline for those who could benefit from more exposure. So our purpose as an organization is very, very multifaceted. It is very multi-pronged, and I'm very, very proud of the work that we do. And so we're going back to the question of, are you really an ally? Because again, I'm often asked to speak about diversity and inclusion. What can our groups do to attract more people of color, more students, more? At a time there was more women, but now I'm seeing here that there is more of an equal representation of women in this room and in other events, which is great. Other aspects are still lacking, especially when it comes to people of color. So I'm going to briefly discuss some don'ts and do's for allyship. So I would like to say, please don't assume you can't help. Please don't assume, just like any other Black organization or organizations that have a focus on racial justice, it is very important that you don't try to exclude yourself from the equation, because these are issues that affect all of us. So please don't assume you can't help, and please don't assume that you can't answer any questions regarding this. Of course, it's always better to defer to those experts, especially those of color, who are, who focus specifically, but don't ever assume you can't help. Also, don't assume that we all care about the same issues or even think alike. The Black atheist demographic is just as diverse as anyone else. Now, there are some Black atheists who love to debate. There are some Black atheists who love to push an envelope. There are also some who would rather, just kind of live and let live, get along and go along, and that's fine. Also, it is, don't assume that because we're Black that we care about all racial justice issues equally, or that we all think the same about them. We have always been diverse. The Black community has always been multifaceted, always had different points of view, and it should never be assumed that any of us can speak for the entire Black community. Heck, I don't even speak for all Black atheists for that matter. But there is a tendency for non-Black folks and non-people of color to assume that the very few people, Black folks, or the very few Black people in the room can speak for the entire community, and don't ever assume that. Please don't dismiss the importance of our groups. Again, as I stand here and discuss the specific challenges that face the Black community, and especially the Black atheist demographic, one of the worst things you can do is show lack of understanding. Now, yes, scientifically, technically, there is no such thing as race scientifically, but it is a system that was put in place, especially during enslavement. And it was also a system put in place that classified those and that were meant to oppress. And so these are systems that we cannot deny exist, and that we actually have to acknowledge for the purposes of what we do. And so it is important to never dismiss. It is important to never dismiss us at all. Also, please don't become defensive when we discuss our concerns. Now, there may be a lot of there are a lot of issues outside of science and evidence that pertain to communities of color, especially as we discuss, we talk about economic injustice, racial injustice, and such. And there's no way of getting around this. White supremacy has hurt all of us. It has hurt all of us. And we cannot stand here and talk about these issues without bringing it up. We have to talk about how these issues have affected all of our communities and actually, in some ways, have prevented progressive measures and aspects of advancement. And so when we talk about Eurocentric ideas and also when we talk about white supremacy, we're not saying that any one white individual is responsible for all of this. However, some of our ancestors might have been, whether you want to acknowledge it or not. So this isn't something that you should become defensive about. It is important that we understand what the problems are and how we can move forward. So, and also, please don't say I don't see color or race, because what you do is you're basically ignoring racism and its problems. Yes, it is very insulting. It is very condescending. And finally, please, we start dreading well, I don't understand why all these Koreans are Black in the first place. It's important to do some research and to get a better understanding as to historical and institutional factors before we start blanketedly asking these questions. But I don't like to end this on a negative note because there are a lot of things that can be done, which is do, listen, and learn. And also do your due diligence. Do some research, but do listen and learn, especially from those of us who have jumped in and who are, and who are speaking from the Black experience and from our, and listen to our perspectives. Do listen and learn from us. Also, do adjust your attitudes and actions when presented with new information. There may be things that you didn't realize you were doing before, and that might be offensive to someone else, or that might have been dismissive or condescending. So, as a community that prides itself on education and information and evidence, and also learning from it, what do we say? When we know better, we do better. And that's exactly what we should be doing. Also, do make sure that we are sufficiently part of the input. So, it's more than just trying to get more people of color and more Black folks into your seats. It's also about retaining them and retaining us, and also making sure that your leadership does reflect diversity and inclusion. So that is very, very important. Also, make your content and programming diverse and relevant. How many times can we sit and talk about the problems of religion in our communities at any given time? So, as atheists, as humanists, as non-believers, there are other things that we are interested in. We are very multifaceted within ourselves. This doesn't have to be the only thing that defines us, even though I contend that it is a very important. It is a very important part of our identity, and it is nothing to be ashamed of. But as folks who are supposed to be more enlightened, especially once you leave religion, our programming and our information and what we do can reflect that. So and not even just within Black History Month. Now that you know that there is more content out there, there are more, there are more things that can be discussed and more things that can be worked on. It's good, relevant, especially to the people who are in your area. That may draw them in a whole lot more. Also, do collaborate and participate and make them more than just one-time efforts. So if there are other organizations within your areas that you have common ground with, that you may be able to collaborate on events with, do that. Be proactive, take that initiative. And it may be difficult. It may be a challenge at times. I know I've certainly been frustrated with trying to collaborate with other organizations and sort of being rebuffed. It happens, but it's important that you show that there are other, especially for those of us who are very passionate about reproductive rights, LGBTQ rights, sexual health, all of that. If there are other organizations who have those focuses and you can work with them, please do that. And again, do be routine about it. And also have information and resources available for those who may be looking for organizations like Black Nonbelievers or other secular organizations. It is important to have, the best thing we can do is to, again, point folks to other organizations that they may be interested in addition to your own. And also, last but not least, do donate and support. I know that many folks who have left religion behind have also been liberated from this idea of having to give to your church on a regular basis. But any or all organizations that have a community purpose need support, and ours is no different. And I will say Black Nonbelievers is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and donations to us are tax deductible. We also have merchandise that we sell to raise funds. We also host different events, and so business help with our work. And as the organizers here know, to put on events costs money. To have the ability to communicate and to connect with the world, it takes support. And it doesn't take, and I don't think any of us ask for you to give us 10% of your money. Even just a few dollars a month or even a few dollars a year makes a huge difference in the work that we do because we need it. And so, also, for those who, this is why I love having visuals, because I often have folks say, well, I'm not Black, can I wear a BN shirt? Absolutely you can. And I don't care who has a problem with that. For those who are watching, you can support our organization however, if it's available, then we encourage you to support. And so here are just a few references, and there may be some questions during the Q&A, but I highly encourage you to look up Sikibu Hutchins, who I mentioned before. I also encourage you to research Jeremiah Kamara. Some of us are familiar with him. He has 2 documentaries on Amazon Prime. The first one is called Contradiction, the Question of Faith, which was released in 2013. The second is called Holy Hierarchy, the Religious Roots of Racism in America. I highly support our organization. However, if it is available, then we encourage you to support. And so here are a few references, and there may be some questions during the Q&A, but I highly encourage you to look up Sikibu Hutchinson, who I mentioned before. I also encourage you to research Jeremiah Kamara. Some of us are familiar with him. He has 2 documentaries on Amazon Prime. The first one is called Contradiction. Question of Faith, which was released in 2013. The second is called Holy Hierarchy, The Religious Roots of Racism in America. I highly recommend watching those documentaries. They are available on Amazon Prime. And also Black Freethinkers, A History of African American Secularism, which is a book by Chris Cameron. It is on sale for Black History Month on Northwestern Press. I will have more information about where you can find these individuals very shortly. So I'm going to read, in conclusion, a quote from one of our members. Before seeing that video of you on YouTube, I really thought I was the only Black person who didn't believe in a God. I then logged onto Facebook and found your organization, Black Nonbelievers Inc. The joy and relief I felt seeing and meeting so many Black people who were skeptical or outright didn't believe. Thank you for being an inspiration and bringing visibility to atheism/secularism in the Black community. It is so needed. Now, once again, I will continue to emphasize that I am not an agent of trying to convince people that they should leave their religion. As much as I have a problem with it, I will contend that where my passion lies is definitely helping those who felt they were alone, who thought that they didn't have a place where they could go. And building community amongst fellow non-believers, especially as our numbers grow, is important. And our ability to be able to convey our position unapologetically and openly. And sometimes saying, I don't give a damn what you think. And said, I'm an atheist and that is okay. Even with the stigma that still surrounds that word or that term. Becoming more comfortable, helping people, first of all, to become comfortable within themselves with that identity. Because for some, it is often a painful journey. Sometimes we lose family members and friends, and sometimes we still do fear losing family members and friends, but there is a way for us to rebuild. And there is a way for us to continue to connect, mostly with each other. But the more we express, the more we become more comfortable with our terms, with our identities, and the more we continue to network and build our communities, and also lead by example on how to be better human beings. We will help to eradicate the fear of atheists. We will show our secular communities that there is more diversity than people think. There are more people doing the work, and they should be supported. And so with that, I say thank you, and let's continue to build and work together to erase those fears. Thank you.
First, that there's no good argument that atheism is true. And secondly, that there are good arguments that theism is true. Now, notice carefully the circumscribed limits of those contentions. We're not here tonight to debate the social impact of religion, or Old Testament ethics, or biblical inerrancy. All interesting and important topics, no doubt, but not the subject of tonight's debate, which is the existence of God. Consider then my first contention, that there's no good argument that atheism is true. Atheists have tried for centuries to disprove the existence of God, but no one's ever been able to come up with a successful argument. So, rather than attack straw men at this point, I'll just wait to hear Mr. Hitchens present his arguments against God's existence, and then I'll respond to them in my next speech. In the meantime, let's turn to my second main contention, that there are good arguments that theism is true. On your program insert, I outlined some of those arguments. Number one, the cosmological argument. The question of why anything at all exists is the most profound question of philosophy. The philosopher Derek Parfit says, no question is more sublime than why there is a universe, why there is anything, rather than nothing. Typically, atheists have answered this question by saying that the universe is just eternal and uncaused. But there are good reasons, both philosophically and scientifically, to think that the universe began to exist. Philosophically, the idea of an infinite past seems absurd. Just think about it. If the universe never began to exist, that means that the number of past events in the history of the universe is infinite. But mathematicians recognize that the existence of an actually infinite number of things leads to self-contradictions. For example, what is infinity minus infinity? Well, mathematically, you get self-contradictory answers. This shows that infinity is just an idea in your mind, not something that exists in reality. David Hilbert, perhaps the greatest mathematician of the 20th century, wrote, "The infinite is nowhere to be found in reality. It neither exists in nature nor provides a legitimate basis for rational thought. The role that remains for the infinite to play is solely that of an idea." But that entails that since past events are not just ideas, but are real, the number of past events must be finite. Therefore, the series of past events can't go back forever. Rather, the universe must have begun to exist. This conclusion has been confirmed by remarkable discoveries in astronomy and astrophysics. In one of the most startling developments of modern science, we now have pretty strong evidence that the universe is not eternal in the past, but had an absolute beginning about 13 billion years ago in a cataclysmic event known as the Big Bang. What makes the Big Bang so startling is that it represents the origin of the universe from literally nothing. For all matter and energy, even physical space and time themselves, came into being at the Big Bang. As the physicist P.C.W. Davies explains, the coming into being of the universe, as discussed in modern science, is not just a matter of imposing some sort of organization upon a previous incoherent state, but literally the coming into being of all physical things from nothing. Now, this puts the atheist in a very awkward position. As Anthony Kenny of Oxford University urges, a proponent of the Big Bang Theory, at least if he is an atheist, must believe that the universe came from nothing and by nothing. But surely that doesn't make sense. Out of nothing, nothing comes. So why does the universe exist instead of just nothing? Where did it come from? There must have been a cause which brought the universe into being. Now, as the cause of space and time, this being must be an uncaused, timeless, spaceless, immaterial being of unfathomable power. Moreover, it must be personal as well. Why? Because the cause must be beyond space and time. Therefore, it cannot be physical or material. Now, there are only two kinds of things that fit that description. Either an abstract object, like numbers, or else a personal mind. But abstract objects can't cause anything. Therefore, it follows that the cause of the universe is a transcendent, intelligent mind. Thus, the cosmological argument gives us a personal creator of the universe. 2, the teleological argument. In recent decades, scientists have been stunned by the discovery that the initial conditions of the Big Bang were fine-tuned for the existence of intelligent life with a precision and delicacy that literally defy human comprehension. This fine-tuning is of two sorts. First, when the laws of nature are expressed as mathematical equations, you find appearing in them certain constants, like the gravitational constant. These constants are not determined by the laws of nature. The laws of nature are consistent with a wide range of values for these constants. Second, in addition to these constants, there are certain arbitrary quantities put in as initial conditions on which the laws of nature operate. For example, the amount of entropy, or the balance between matter and antimatter in the universe. Now, all of these constants and quantities fall into an extraordinarily narrow range of life-permitting values. Were these constants or quantities to be altered by less than a hair's breadth, the balance would be destroyed and life would not exist. To give just one example, the atomic weak force, if it were altered by as little as 1 part out of 10 to the 100th power, would not have permitted a life-permitting universe. Now, there are 3 possible explanations of this remarkable fine-tuning: physical necessity, chance, or design. Now, it can't be due to physical necessity because the constants and quantities are independent of the laws of nature. In fact, string theory predicts that there are around 10 to the 500th power different possible universes consistent with nature's laws. So could the fine-tuning be due to chance? Well, the problem with this alternative is that the odds against the fine-tuning occurring by accident are so incomprehensibly great that they cannot be reasonably faced.
That's another one for the record books. Another commission done. What up, Creation? Yo, Cedric. It's one of my homies. If you're ever in the stream and you see a guy named DXL1 Arisen, that's him. I think he said he was like 14 years old. Back in like in the 90s. In the early 90s, he was like, I think he was like a teenager, 14 or 15. He met Ali. He was a little lightweight boxer. Ali came through the gym where he was at and got a good picture with, the GOAT. But it's an old picture. It's a really terrible picture. It's just terrible. It's a cool picture, but the quality, the resolution is terrible. But he wanted it so bad. He wanted me to paint this for him so bad. He asked me like, I ain't gonna lie to you, he asked me like 3 times over the past year or so, probably a little bit longer than a year. He's been asking me to do this, and I keep telling him no. It's like, no, D1, it's a terrible picture. It's like, but please, I want it. I'm like, bro, it's horrible. I can't see anything. I can't see any real details. I mean, you can tell that's Ali, but. And D1's like, man, I'm gonna pay you for the thing, and I'm like, D1, man, bruh, I don't think this is gonna be a good painting, but he talked me into it. So finally got this done for him. And it don't look too bad, you know. I'm satisfied with it. I just hope he's satisfied with it. All right. Now it's back to this commission, because I ain't doing nothing but making that money lately. I like it. Appreciate it, bro. So this is the next commission I'm working on. This is a good friend of mine. Yeah. Hey. All right. Oh man. Just checking social media real quick. See what's popping, if anything. Alright, so what I'm about to do now is roll a doobie. And my grinder's downstairs. Shit.
Already have all the solutions to all the big problems in the world. They already exist.
Gaia Opta platform for awakening.
That's right.
Can you talk a little bit about those other explosives that were found at the, or suspicious devices that were found at the motel? Were those, do you know what the intended target of those was?
It looks to me like the actual feed of the press conference cut out. The feed I was getting, it looks like it actually cut out because I just restarted it and that happened. So I don't know if there's another place with it, but it looks like that feed actually just stopped. So as they were doing the Q&A, let me try one more thing, but it looks like they're having issues with their feed. Is this going to be the exact same place again? Let's see.
That's right.
Can you talk a little bit about those other explosives that were found at the, or suspicious devices that were found at the motel? Were those, do you know what the intended target of those was?
Yeah, that looks like, let me try one other thing here. Try one other option here. That there might have been an issue with the actual feed. Is this going to work? I don't know if that's going to work. No, that's not working. Let's try one other here. Sorry about the technical difficulty. Let's see. Oh, I think I have it. Hold on, guys. I think I have it. Hold on 1 second here. Let's see if this works.
Share with you. Sorry.
Well, hold on.
Apparently I was speaking a little quick when I was spelling the suspect's last name, but it's Gregory Paul Ulrich. U as in Union, L-R-I-C-H. Thank you, everyone.
Violence is a growing concern in New Haven. Last year, the city had 122 shooting incidents. That is up from 77 shootings.
Brian Lutz, Wright County Attorney. I expect that the defendant will appear in court Thursday morning at 10:30. Prior to that, I will file a detailed complaint that spells out all of the details that are not yet available due to the early stages of this investigation. Thank you all for coming.
Okay, sorry, so we just missed a little bit of the end of it. So let's just sum up what they said at the press conference. So this is the suspect here, and that's the picture according to WCCO. So this morning, so first of all, they said there were 5 patients transported. That doesn't mean there weren't more people than that injured. What they specifically said, the hospital president said there were 5 patients transported. So were there other people injured who didn't get transported to the hospital? We don't know. What is the condition of the 5 patients transported? We don't know. Did any of them die? We don't know. They wouldn't answer that question. So we don't know. At least 5 people transported with injuries. Fox 9 has reported they heard there were 9 injured. Multiple outlets are saying that some of them are critically injured or seriously injured, but we don't know the extent of the injuries and if anybody has died yet. The police say that this man did it, and they say Gregory Ulrich did it. They said that he is someone very familiar to them. They said he is very familiar to us, and the police said that they believe he targeted the facility or somebody at the facility because they didn't really get specific, but they did at one point say that they implied he had been treated there, and they said something like, because he had been treated or attempted to be treated there. They said, we think because of his roughly speaking, they said something like, we think because of his familiarity with the facility, we believe he was targeting the facility or somebody at the facility. So it sounded to me like they were saying he had been treated there, but they weren't, totally specific. But they said they're familiar with him. They don't think this is domestic terrorism, which would mean they don't think he was doing this for some political cause, or some religion or something. What they said in that press conference is they believe he was targeting the facility or a person or people at the facility. It sounded like at one point they did suggest that he had been treated there, or they tried to treat him there, and they said they were very familiar with this guy. And also they said that there were suspicious devices at the Super 8
I cannot
hotel
find this damn
where
video.
he had been staying. But they could not confirm whether there had been any explosions at the health clinic. There are reports there were. Fox 9 says a law enforcement source told them there were 3 bombs at the health clinic and 2 of them exploded. But they would not confirm any explosions at the health clinic, and they said there were suspicious devices at the Super 8 where he was staying, but they didn't confirm the nature of these devices. So we're bringing you the latest updates here, and but again, they say they don't believe it's terrorism. They're familiar with the person. I believe they said they had gotten calls about him in the past. So somebody they had dealt with before the police, and they say they believe it was just him who did this. At this point, we don't, I certainly thoughts with all the people who were injured, and we hopefully none of them, they all survive. But we'll see if we get any more details coming out about the condition of them. They didn't even release conditions of the people who have been injured. Okay, I want to take some comments from you guys. Give a shout. Let me know your thoughts on this. We'll take some questions from you guys. Again, here's a little summary. 5 people injured in shooting at Allina Health Clinic in Buffalo, Minnesota. Shooter in custody. This happened this morning there in Buffalo, Minnesota. Let's see here. 5 victims were taken to area hospitals. There is no update on their conditions. I don't know if there are other people injured besides the people who were transported. Video from the scene shows several windows at the clinics have been shattered. All right. By the way, hey, thanks to Tony Del Monte. Tony says, Tony wrote to me about this early this morning. Tony said, been to Buffalo a lot. Nice and friendly town. I always go there during spring flooding from Crow River. Thank you, Tony, for your support. Thank you also to Sonic and Vanessa Wilcoxon and Strable for your support as well. All right, I want to take some comments and questions from you guys. At Lookner on Twitter, where you can reach me at Lookner.
A mass shooting. I thought the goddamn, I hear about some mass shooting.
Somebody else sent me another photo.
I thought America was changing.
But I don't know where you got it. If you
thought America has switched up on me, but nope. As soon as I think America changing, they come through with a good old mass shooting. You know what I'm saying? The American way.
Hang on, what is this here?
It ain't America if I can't have a mass shooting every goddamn once a month.
Our viewer Uffy sent me this, which says Zion Lutheran Church.
I mean, at least in the news.
2019. I think he said he saw. Oh yeah. So this is from a local church in Buffalo, Minnesota. This is a church in Buffalo, Minnesota. Uffy found this, and it says Zion Lutheran Church Council update.
You keep saying Buffalo. I thought he was talking about New York. And if it's Buffalo, Minnesota, nobody don't give a damn. I'm surprised that shit made national news. But we had national news from my county. It wasn't like, it's technically the same city I live in. It's just a little offshoot township like area that has a different name, even though it's not any fucking where different. So it's right in my town where we had a shooting that made national news, where the guy killed his 2 neighbors and then killed himself. Like, that shit was literally down the street from me, yeah.
Was given for him to not trespass on the property of the church. Almira says Intel Doge tweeted about that. I didn't see that.
Motherfucker killed two of his neighbors, a husband and wife couple, and go in the house and turn the gun on himself and then kill his damn self. His neighbor called him a pussy, and he did all that shit. I have to agree with the neighbor that was some pussy ass shit to do.
WCCO has his photo. I think isn't that the one we already showed you, or is that a different one? Yeah, this is the photo from ASTP.
That was some pretty pussy ass shit to do, yo.
Yeah, Buffalo, Minnesota. Buffalo, Minnesota. Hang on a second here. Let me check for more updates. Give me a shout at Lookner on Twitter. Oh, look. Buffalo police chief says they're familiar with Ulrich dating back to 2003. Says he has a history of being unhappy with health care he's received. That's from David Schumann. I don't know if that was specifically at the press conference or if that's extra from David Schumann. I don't recall hearing that. I mean, maybe I'm during the press conference, I'm trying to keep the broadcast going, so sometimes I miss some details. But David Schumann says the Buffalo, Minnesota police chief says they're familiar with Ulrich dating back to 2003. Says he has a history of being unhappy with health care he has received.
2003, this motherfucker been giving the local police department shit, yo. Boozy, what a doozy. I'm trying to roll this doobie.
Okay, so that's clearly somebody well known to the police there. I'm sorry, I think they did say that. They said it in the press conference, I think. I might have just missed it, I apologize. Same thing in Star Tribune. Oh, Elizabeth G says maybe at the end of the presser. Yeah, we didn't catch the last, 2 or 3 minutes of the presser. Let's see. Hang on a second. Ari Bobari says he was unhappy with care from 2 locations in Buffalo. Salvatore says, wonder if he has ever been in jail before. I do not know if he's ever been in jail before. Our viewer Trelo says, such a selfish act. I pray for the families involved, like healthcare workers don't have it bad currently. Cam sent me, I'm not going to share this because I can't confirm it. There is a Facebook page which looks like maybe his Facebook page, but it only has one picture on it. And it looks like him, but I'm not going to share it because it's not confirmed by him. But it certainly does look like him. It's a Facebook page, though, with one picture on it. I don't know if he set that up or somebody else set it up. But thank you, Cam, for sending that in. Cher sent me an interview, but let me see, this is next page. Let me just see what this is.
Yeah, try to get the candy in my mouth without taking the doobie out.
Hang on 1 second. Older man, gray hair. Yeah, so she says, we heard this. Okay, so if you want to watch this is from Jamie Broman, who says, interview I had with an eyewitness today shooting the line. Now, she said she saw the shooter say, I'm going to call 911. We've seen another report that said the shooter himself did call 911.
The shooter called
The
911.
shooter said something like, there's been a shooting, you're going to need a lot of ambulances or something like that. That's from Jamie Broman, if you want to watch that. Thank you for sending that in Shire.
So I left work early today because there was a fucking snowstorm. Is it still snowing? It's not snowing
Okay,
anymore.
I'm looking for some more updates
But-
here. Nothing on the conditions of the people. Let's see here.
I had to do some research for a pilot program that my job is trying to initiate. So I've been reading a lot of fucking papers this afternoon. But some interesting stuff on
Is this morning at this Alina
the
Health
cost effectiveness of juvenile programs and shit.
Buffalo, Minnesota, which is about a half an hour west of Minneapolis. A guy who has been
But today was like
as, where is the tweet here? A guy who's been identified as Gregory Ulrich.
today was my first day
He entered
in
this
a long time, like
Buffalo, Minnesota,
literally working from home. That shit be feeling weird as shit working from home, yeah. Kind of cool, but definitely distracting because I can just turn the TV on. Well, at work I have my phone playing or YouTube on or something, but like I'm still in the office, sitting at my desk. It ain't like I can just lounge around on the bed with some sweatpants and my shoes off. That shit, that's right. I mean, but what I did at home, like I said, I just had to read over some case studies and read over a research paper, and then do some a little bit of manipulation on a graphic image that I'm working on, and get some emails out, and had to text a few people, and so I did get shit done, but it's weird doing that shit from home. And then yesterday in the office, we had one of our coworkers come in. One of our coworkers came in. Yo, like,
They said that they believe he was targeted.
she ain't been in the office like since before I had my surgery, yo. Like, she just does not come to the office. Period. Like, she ain't even been in there since, like, I know at least before Christmas, because when she came in there, she still had like Christmas gifts. Like, some of the office workers gave out Christmas gifts or whatever. Like, she still had Christmas gifts on her desk when she came in yesterday. It was like, yeah, that was a while ago. That was 2 months ago. You ain't been here in at least 2 months. But I haven't seen her for a long ass time. My down stuff, like, motherfuckers work from home. They just don't feel like they need to come to the office.
I do want to say thanks to our moderators. Sarah 55 is moderating. Angel Sharp is moderating. Really appreciate that. Thank you. Also, Pio Minds Any Motive. I think we just discussed what we know about that, but no confirmation right now. But the police sound like they have a pretty good idea of what, generally, just, in terms of they think he was targeting the health care of people who live here. Joe Serino and Roxanne Becky are moderating on Facebook. Thank you for moderating there. Thank you also, Diane Summers, for the Facebook. And also, thank you to our Twitch moderators as well. I know Idaho Star is a moderator. And, thank you, Idaho Star. Let's see. I want to take some more comments from you guys. Let's see here. Yes, Michelle Marsitti, the suspect, is in custody. He actually called 911. Thanks, by the way, for the Facebook stars of Diane Summers, Samantha Torres. Samantha says sending prayers to the family. Kathy Van Pelt, thank you. Jenna McLaughlin, Manuela Castillo, Patty Huddleston, Joe Howard.
Yeah, but the VR, actually, in here, what I'm not understanding the whole VR gallery experience is what I'm hearing just in these rooms from like collectors about like that they're super bored with it and it's just like them in an empty room. Like, we had a New Year's party in some, I think it was, Alt Space VR. We had a New Year's party. My friends and I have a New Year's party every year for like the last few years at one of our houses, at somebody's house in like really awesome VR stuff is he went to that house, took all these photos of like the whole house from top to bottom, inside and outside, and created the VR world. And when we stepped into the VR world of this house, it was like we were stepping into the house. And I was with a bunch of our friends in this VR world, and we could talk to each other. You know, we're all our little avatars. But we had our headsets on, and you could do it from a computer too. And we were all talking with each other and like hanging out, like at a party. And yes, we were at home. It's COVID, whatever. But it was amazing. And when, if I was talking to somebody and it was a little bit loud around us, then we could move a few feet away and it got quieter. We had our own conversation while we were still in the room. So it's not like, a Zoom breakout room. And it was just amazing. And I was at a big, huge Burning Man. It all started because these guys did it with Burning Man, and they created like a whole Burning Man world where you could go through these portals into specific camps, Burning Man camps, and each of those camps was like its own little world. So I'm like, why are the art fairs not doing? And it's like it's super interactive, and you can have like I was in one portal. I went through one portal for like a gallery space at Burning Man. And at first I was alone in there looking at these images. There were a bunch of photographs. And then somebody else popped through the portal. And we just had like a conversation, in real time. Like, it was, I don't understand, I guess, why the art fairs aren't doing something like this. And why the galleries aren't hosting these sort of experiences for their gallery shows. Or, I mean, maybe some are, I don't know.
They don't understand the tech, and they don't have the technologists behind them, and they want real shows. So
yeah, exactly. I mean, and like, if you had a really expensive property, like why would you start throwing your eggs in a basket of a digital realm that would ultimately cut from your physical environment? Like these galleries pay so much money to hold that space, and it's really good space to have too. But I just wanted I've never seen a gallery like the one you were talking about, but I know the technology of like point clouds exist and like digitally scanning things. Like I've seen it done, so I don't think that's a really costly thing to do for a gallery. For one, to recreate and have that point cloud online, and two, for the sake of what Carla said about being able to put walk around and do like a 3D pan of a space. Like I've done that digitally. Like I created like a personal gallery for a project. And all you have to do is create like a 360 rendering and put that into a software. I used a software called Kula, and you can put that down and like tie together different positions basically where you do those renderings, and you'll be able to observe art from that point and all the pieces around it. So it's definitely possible, and it's not the most expensive thing to do, but I don't think galleries are trying to bring on like 3D designers to create these spaces and ultimately do them, because I feel like it ultimately would be like, I don't know, it would hurt them more than it would help them in a way, depending on how long this thing lasts.
I just think it gives people a much greater, it just makes it a lot more accessible, and maybe that's, maybe the art world doesn't want to be super accessible, if that's part of it, creating scarcity and all that.
Also think of it, the fact that there's been quite a ton of gallery talks on Clubhouse recently, and the amount of rooms where people are talking about galleries are actually a little bit insane. I was in one earlier today, and you had people from like Art Independent Fair, Art Basel, like a bunch of top art fairs, and one person said something really interesting, which was that at the moment there's not an open source software available where people can just kind of plug and play or adapt it to their own gallery. If they do want to do it, they have to invest in an individual to create a unique VR experience for the gallery. And if you times that by, I know all the galleries out there, you have to invest quite a decent amount of money. Then what you're doing as well, you're taking away visitors away from your physical gallery, which they want.
All right.
That's normal.
After work stream, I gotta get back to the paint. Appreciate you at least sitting in here, chilling in the stream with me.
Our Alpha Tulipani asked me what's happening, and there was a report of a bomb exploding. I heard a local reporter now saying that there wasn't an explosion, so I'm not clear on whether there was an explosion or not. Bomb squad has been out there. So we're going to bring you updates. We should have at least audio coverage of the press conference. I don't know that we'll have video, but we should have at least audio of it. And that's supposed to start in about 19 minutes. 19 minutes. So let's get you the latest updates here. And also, I'm going to do a little searching around. I didn't see.
How's it going? So once again, just trying to really see how this thing works, and if it can be used as a merging tool for my YouTube channel. I have the Clubhouse app open, and I have a chat room open right now. And yeah, so basically, instead of typing or texting through the YouTube app, if you download the Clubhouse app, you can actually chat live. But I don't have a lot of followers on here, and I'm not following a lot of people. So I would like invite people to my room, but all these people are more than likely like already in a room. Yo, Glover, what up? I want to paint, but then I want to finish this doobie real quick too. Or I could paint and finish the doobie at the same time. So there is a shooting in Buffalo, Minnesota.
On the sports sedan. Experience amazing at your Lexus dealer.
Traffic go fairly close to it, I'd say, and moving past, and they're not really talking to people. I'll say there's not a lot of people out here looking, which surprised me. But they're
Our sports director Jim Rich, who lives in the Buffalo area, just did an interview about 30 minutes ago with a woman from the Buffalo area who was dropping her mom off at the time of this shooting, and I wonder if we can play that interview again.
Appointment there today. Can you walk us through what happened next?
Yeah, I pulled in. I was just getting ready to drop her off at the door, and two of the nurses came running out to my vehicle. I got in. They said they heard about 11 shots within a minute, and they didn't see a shooter, but they assumed that's what it was. And then about 2 minutes later, we saw the front windows be shot out, and we left the scene.
So what did they tell you when they got in the car? You were pulling up. Were you out of the vehicle at that time, or were you just pulling up?
I was just pulling up and saw them running out, so I knew something was wrong. And they said, "Oh, we heard gunshots, and we need to go." So they got in, and we left.
And where did you take them?
I took them to the other clinic, so they could let them know what it.
Right. It was. How crazy was it for you? I mean, you must have thought, like, wait.
She spoke with someone who was in the clinic. So, Jen, tell us what you've learned.
Yeah, so outside the clinic here, in a parking lot nearby, I ended up speaking to a woman, an older woman who was in the clinic at the time of the shooting, and she's obviously upset and shocked.
All right. That dude is pretty strong. Let's get back to this artwork. Smart work. Artwork. Hard work is hard work. And hard work is yard work with yard birds.
Hyundai Culinary Maintenance. Standard on every 2020 Hyundai for 3 years. That's better than Toyota, Honda, and Nissan. Now for a limited time, lease a Hyundai Elantra for just $149 a month. Learn more at buyhyundai.com.
The Joe Road Experience. Like I have a Tesla. I love my Tesla. I love it to death. It's probably the best car that I have. But there's something that I miss, and what I miss is I want to feel the gear. I want to feel I push the left pedal down, the clutch engages, I push the gear shift into third gear, I let the clutch out, I push down the gas. There's this interaction with this thing that lets me, I'm engaged, I'm feeling it. There's something about those kind of cool cars and mechanical watches, and there's a lot of other things those things excite me.
Yeah,
it's like tactile.
It's like a dance.
Yeah, I like cooking over fire. You know what I'm saying? Like there's things that I still like that are older things. I like running on dirt. You know, I like those things. I like chopping wood. There's tactile experiences. You know?
Yeah.
I know those are dying. I know they're dying. The manual gearbox is dying.
My car stole a stick. I talked about it last time I was here. The Mazda 3. It's a stick shift.
People are kissing with masks on. Do you understand what's happening? Yeah.
What?
Yeah. People are making out with
two
masks
masks?
on. No,
Just
one
to be
mask.
safe?
They're dangerous. Dangerous people. But you know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like mask kissing is like, it's a step in the wrong direction. We're going to become aliens. We're going to become the Greys with the big black eyes, the giant heads.
Yeah.
We're not going to kiss at all anymore.
No.
We're going to do it all through our brains.
It'll be a relic of the past.
Yeah, it's going to be like the difference between a Tesla and a manual 1970 Chevelle. It's going to be the difference between real fucking and people just plugging into some computer and just letting it all happen inside some virtual reality experience where you don't have to worry about cooties. That's what I'm worried about, man. I'm worried about tactile human experiences. And I'm not really worried. I'm recognizing that the same way, if you wanted to look back on primates and the early primates and go, look, if you brought a chimp, into the future and said, hey, this is what it's gonna be like. You're gonna fly in planes and you're gonna eat off plates like fuck. Yeah. I like swinging from trees and I like throwing my own shit at my enemies.
I can't give that up.
Yeah, I'm not giving up throwing shit. I like shit in my hand and giving it a good time, world. Yeah, and I fucking get together with my other chimp buddies and we fuck up some dude who crossed our imaginary line. We kill him. You know, there's parts of that for sure. Life is better today, but I'm not a future human. I'm a current human. And in my current state, there's tactile experiences that I enjoy. I like kissing. I like holding hands. I like shaking a person's hand when I meet them. I like drinking whiskey. I like driving car. I like shifting my own gears. I like opening doors for myself. Whenever I do one of those things where like you step towards it and the door opens up, I never use those fucking things. I grab that handle. I open that bitch up. I like opening doors. I want to experience things.
Yeah.
I want to interact with the world. I like interacting. Yeah.
I think there'll always be a place for that.
No.
More. Well, no. COVID has put a wrench into that.
COVID is basically showing us what the future holds in store for us. What the future holds in store for us is the elimination of biological threats. And there's a lot of biological threats that we take for granted, like emotions, hormones, the desire to breed, conquering, the natural primate instincts to dominate environments and to expand our boundaries and our kingdoms. All those things are dangerous. They're not good. But they also create art and romance and controversy, and they provide people with enthusiasm and motivation. There's all these things about being a human that creates art and makes things like wine. It makes things worth living. Whiskey, cigars.
I do miss the kinetic nature of life pre-COVID. You know what I mean? Like bumping into someone, going to something, just serendipitously meeting someone.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen anymore, really. Now everything is just so...
It happens in Texas.
I'm 2 days in, so I'm learning, but...
I'm going to take you around.
yeah.
We're going to be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, the people that don't want it to go back are the people that are most fearful. The people that are like, my grandmother died. I understand. I get it. Yeah, it's a terrifying tragedy that anybody has to die from a disease. But we have to recognize that we're all going to die. And you can't stop all life because a disease comes along and kills some of us. We have to recognize what can we do to mitigate the dangers of this disease. Plus, what can we do to mitigate the dangers of dissolving our culture? We haven't done that. Instead, we've only concentrated on mitigating dangers of spreading something. So stay home, wear 3 masks, touch no one, wear gloves while you're driving. Like, fuck, man. This is not life. This is not life. And most of these people that are 3 mask people, they don't know goddamn anything about vitamins and quercetin and saunas and all the different methods that you can use to stimulate your immune system. It's like we don't want people to be able to take their own chances and make their own risks. And the more liberal you are, and the more left-wing you are, the more likely you are to appeal to authoritarianism. And this is one of the most discouraging aspects of our culture in 2021, is that like all these people that are supposed to be like left-wing people. And when I was a kid, I've always been left-wing. I've always been, my family's like, my stepdad hippie. He was a hippie. My mom, they were very like open-minded left-wing people. It was all about free expression. It was all about letting people be who they are and living whatever life you wanted to be and accepting people for who they are. This is not what's happening now. This is all this fear-based, weird appeal to authoritarianism. There's too much disinformation on the internet. We have to have a czar of truth. There's people calling for a czar of truth. Do you know this?
No.
This is the new thing. They're asking for the government to create a czar of truth. The fucking government to decide what's real and what's not. To dispel disinformation. So you can pull this up. Czar of truth. This is something that CNN has talked about. A lot of these like fucking weirdo networks have talked about. Like, do you understand? Do fucking people understand what happens when you start censoring people? When you start saying things like, we need the government to step in. The government's never good at anything. They've never been good at anything. Not one fucking thing have they been great at.
This whole like COVID crisis, like businesses are suffering. They're just, if you're a business, you're fucked. But especially in LA,
dude,
it sucks.
75% of all LA restaurants are gone.
Yeah, there's no contingency plan in place, and then also they're like stay home. But then how do you make money?
Yeah.
So you can't have it both ways. You have to have like a safety net in place.
The people that are making these distinctions and making these decisions, they don't lose a paycheck. That's the problem. All these mayors and governors and health board advisors, they don't miss a fucking paycheck. They can shut down everything. And they do it for optics.
Well, yeah, I think there's a way to be smart about this. Obviously, this is a real thing, and it does affect people. But
but listen, man, you got through it.
I got through it, yeah, sure. But like I'm younger, and I know there are cases where people are hit really hard by this. Bureaucracy attached to it, where you're not even using logic. Like the Comedy Store, they were allowed before this. Like, look, it's in purple tier right now, whatever it is.
Purple tier?
Yeah. Like outdoor dining is allowed now in Los Angeles. But when I made the decision to come out here, everything was clamped down. But before it was clamped down, they did have outdoor dining and all that. And the Comedy Store was allowed to have outside seating in the parking lot. You know where we park before we do our sets? So there was tables. There was chairs, and they could watch TV. They could watch a football game. They could watch the Comedy Store documentary. They were able to be congregated in that parking lot. But they weren't allowed to, if you put a comedian doing jokes outdoor, that was suddenly against the rules. But like nothing has changed other than instead of a TV that their focus is on, they are watching a comedian. But for some reason, the city deemed that not allowable.
Because the city is filled, the city government is filled with people so fucking stupid, they want to be a part of the city government. That's the problem.
Yes, it just on the ground floor.
In your mouth.
All right, thank you. It makes no sense to anyone.
It doesn't have to make sense.
And it was frustrating because before the shutdown, when everything was like super locked down, I was doing a lot of outdoor shows in LA. And I was doing all these alt shows just like in backyards and on the top of hotels and stuff. But the Comedy Store wasn't allowed to do shows because it was called the Comedy Store. There was too much attention on it.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
I think it's just a bunch of fools. That's all it is. It's just a bunch of fools working in government. It doesn't have to make any sense. They just have to keep their jobs. And they have to give off the perception that they're doing something that is helping. And it's not true. Catch new episodes of the Joe Rogan Experience for free, only on Spotify. Watch back catalog JRE videos on Spotify, including clips. Easily, seamlessly switch between video and audio experience. On Spotify, you can listen to the JRE in the background while using other apps and can download episodes to save on data costs, all for free. Spotify is absolutely free. You don't have to have a premium account to watch new JRE episodes. You just need to search for the JRE on your Spotify app. Go to Spotify now to get full episode of the Joe Rogan Experience.
With quality that's guaranteed for life, Bathfitter doesn't just fit your bath, it fits your high standards. Why have over 2 million people welcomed Bathfitter into their homes? It just fits. Call now or visit bathfitter.com to book your free consultation.
Read about you was that you worked in a sand mine when you were young. That you dug sand all day.
Yeah, I was growing up. I was about 10 years old when I started that because I was in the village and where I grew up. After leaving my aunt's house, I went to my grandma and we had to do something. You know, we had to work to contribute at home, buy oil, to buy food, and also for our scholarship, for books. So you have to work. And that's how we started. Even though that work was meant for adults, but we didn't have any option, so we take what we had at the time.
Growing up doing something like that, that's got to, first of all, it had to be very difficult. Like
very
digging sand.
Yeah.
It's also, your body must develop very strong from doing something like that. At 10 years old, like as you're growing, as you're maturing, doing something that's that difficult, I mean, it must have made you really fucking strong.
Yeah, I hope so. But what I was...
Well, obviously it did. But it's just genetics too. There's a lot of good things that came your way that way. But also the difficulty of doing something when you're that young, such hard labor. I mean, it had to teach you discipline. There had to be like some positive... It's terrible that you had to do that at 10.
Yeah.
But there had to be some positive aspects of it, some positive repercussions of it.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I didn't like my life, and I always feel like I miss my childhood. Like it's something missing in it because it's been so much frustration in my life. You know, like I had to work by that age, and it wasn't enough. Like when school starts all the time, I'm gonna go to school and most of the time still didn't have a pen to take note or a notebook to write on it. Sometimes no shoes or clothes, just have to wear like my uniform was tear all over, and I was frustrated to look around and see other kids looking good. You know, they went in vacation to this family member, came back with all brand new stuff, and I was just there looking crabby with my. I had to like take my old book and look for an empty page to take a note, hoping that when I have a book, I'll copy the note from this year in the new book. But at first I always had to use the old book, and most of the time teachers, they don't understand why you don't have a book. They don't understand why you don't have a pen. Sometimes they just think that you didn't tell your parents. You should tell your parents so they can buy it for you. They don't understand that you can't not just afford it. You know, your parent can't, and they will kick you out from the classroom. Maybe just to say, go tell your parents. And
you couldn't tell them we can't
afford it. They knew, but what can they do? Nothing, you know, because most of the time it's going to be even with the money that I work that they're going to buy my pen, my book.
Yeah.
Now, that dude right there is soft spoken, but he a fucking UFC fighter. I'm about to check out some clips from him real quick.
This coach Fernand Lopez at the MMA factory in Paris. They bring in guys who...
And Cutter knocks Arlovsky down. That is it. The Predator, Princess Ngannou. 5 and in color.
Here you see he's fighting at range. Arlovsky fires, just misses. Ngannou comes over the top of the left and boom. Beautiful. Left and boom. Arlovsky fires, just misses.
That's crazy how fast he was on top of him, yo.
Fighting at range. Arlovsky fires, just misses. Ngannou comes over the top of the left and boom. Beautiful. Follow up to his counter with that right hand. And look, that is not Ngannou's best punch, right? That's how powerful this hand is. Look, he's almost fading backwards as he lands that right hand. And Send Arlovsky is a big dude flying backwards to the canvas. This Ngannou. Man, this guy is super strong. Look at this. He has
There's the time. Wow! Francis Ngannou by submission of round 1.
About to break his fucking arm.
Fight off the clinch as Hamilton's looking to go for a high crotch here. Just rips it, throws him to the ground, gets his base here, puts his knee on the belly, just says, you know what, this is behind your back. Anthony Hamilton is not a weak man, but wow.
Oh, nice left hook.
Yeah, he bloodied up too. Henrique bloodied up. Oh, uppercut.
Yeah, he's done. That's it. That's it. Wow.
Knockout! Vicious uppercut!
Wow. Serious power. That left uppercut was nasty. Outstanding combination. Look at this right hand. Sneaks through, catches him on the temple, had him hurt, and a barrage. Look at this left uppercut. And that's the end of the fight right there. He landed one more shot afterwards, but he was completely out. He landed that one on the neck, actually.
You know, you don't see a lot of 4 to 5 piece combinations from big heavyweights. That's what made the difference in this fight.
Much has been made of Velasquez's injuries, but in terms of his body, he's never felt more confident in it. Oh, he got Velasquez is hurt. And Ngannou closes the show.
Oh my goodness gracious!
Has not out Cain Velasquez.
Wow. 1-2 down the middle. Boom! And we see, watch Cain's knee. It just gives out. Ooh, right there. Just gave out, just slipped, gave out, and it started eating some huge punches. I mean, that's all it takes. It was the first 1-2 that did the trick, and then the big heavy Ngannou right here lifting up, and then the weight, and you see it slide out, the knee pop, that's it.
Francis Ngannou with the biggest win of his career. Not a lot of people burning out Nick Maynard's phone to try to get a matchup with Ngannou.
Down goes the ring! Francis Ngannou has arrived!
That's what we were talking about, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, just perfect on the chin. And shut him completely off with one shot. That's how scary Francis Ngannou is. I mean, that's like a scene in a movie.
Francis Ngannou. Look like a bad motherfucker, yo.
This one's the perk gift for the friend who's been getting a little too full during quarantine. Maybe your son, a father, or your boyfriend. In which case, it's really a gift for yourself, ladies and gents. Manscaped and their new performance package. This all-in-one kit that helps you maintain.
This is a bad position for Alex. He's got to scramble out of here. Oh, big shots. Big shots by John Jones.
In trouble here.
Hudson's in trouble.
John
That's it.
Jones has
That's it.
regained the throne.
Wow.
We see here, John times a beautiful takedown, gets it, and from there he's able to progress to half guard, start landing big elbows right away so that he can move up the body. Once he passes half guard, gets the side down, he goes to the crucifix position, lands some huge elbows. This forces Alex to try to belly out. John then goes to the half Nelson, as you see here, to try to keep Alex from bellying out, and then he's able to put that left hook in and keep Alex bellied out to where he can just start unloading big punches right there. And this is the end that you're watching right here. Just too many big punches, too much top pressure from Jones. He gets the finish. Very nice fight. John Jones, great technique. Took every position step by step until he got the finish. just not being stopped in the octagon. That's what Jones wants. To be first man in the UFC to stop Quinton Rampage Jackson.
The President's Day Sings event at Raymore Flanagan, you'll find everything you need to achieve the perfect.
The Joe Rogan experience.
That he has the consciousness.
En mis 15 años que estuve como atleta,
That's 15 years as an athlete.
creo que 2 casos salieron positivos.
And 2 cases came out positive.
Wow.
En Cuba.
En Cuba.
En Cuba.
Out of all those years, 2 cases.
2 cases. ¿Y de dónde sacaron las pastillas? Las
I don't
trajeron,
know. I don't know.
las trajeron adentro.
Uno era un muchacho de pesa,
One guy was a weightlifter.
el que le decían el guajiro.
El Guajiro, as they called him, the country motherfucker.
Crazy.
He was crazy. El Guajiro.
El guajiro. Y creo que el otro dio positivo, pero por marihuana.
And the other guy was positive for
marijuana.
Yeah.
Oh.
Y el guajiro creo que dio positivo por testosterona.
Testosterone. He was positive for testosterone.
How common is marijuana in Cuba?
Hay mucha marihuana en Cuba.
Sí.
Sí.
Sí hay. Sí hay. No es. A ver. Si tú lo pones a mirar.
If you start looking at it.
Sorry. Para nosotros, los cubanos, hay mucho.
For the Cubans, there's a lot of marijuana.
Porque mi sobrina
His niece
nunca ha visto una marihuana en su vida.
never saw a pot plant in her life.
Mi sobrino no sabe lo que es eso.
His nephew doesn't even know what it is.
Nunca, seguro estoy que no ha escuchado ni hablar de eso.
He never even heard people speak about it.
Pero cuando tú vas en the street,
When you go on the streets,
you know,
Yeah.
la gente sabe lo que se está hablando. La gente sabe lo que es un Percocet.
¿qué es lo que un Percocet?
Percocet es una pastilla.
Ah, un Percocet. People know what a Percocet is.
Pero eso es in the people street.
That's in the people's street.
Is marijuana illegal in Cuba?
Ilegal.
You get in big trouble.
Big trouble. Big trouble. And Joe, te llevo a 100 casas. Listen.
I'll take you to 100 houses
En My City,
in the city.
Pinar del Río, 100 casas. Y te cojo muchachitos.
And they'll get kids.
Quizás ahora,
Maybe now,
porque
maybe.
como vi la sociedad en el mundo entero está un poco loca.
The whole society and the whole world is a little fucking crazy right now.
Pero por lo menos en mi tiempo,
In his era there in Cuba,
la gente, tú podías tomar 100 casas y podías de las 100 casas coger 2 niños y le hacían una pregunta, ¿qué era? No, te cogían 2 niños de 12 a 15 años y le preguntaban qué era marihuana y no sabían lo que era.
you could go to 100 kids and take 2 out of each house and ask them if they know what marijuana is. They don't know what it is.
Wow.
Yeah. Pero para nuestro sistema,
So is it now the system we live in?
que no es posible haber marihuana, si tú me preguntas, ¿hay bastante marihuana? Para nuestro sistema sí hay. No es comparado como aquí.
It's not compared to what it's like here.
Pero hay marihuana.
There's marijuana. When Ozo Motley went to Cuba, the band Ozo Motley from LA, he told me he copped.
Oh, yeah?
He copped some weed in Cuba.
I would be so fucking scared.
Yeah, I wouldn't fuck it up.
You want to get locked up in Cuba.
¿Cuánto tiempo dan por marihuana en Cuba?
What's that? Would you ask him?
Look.
Would you?
How much time they give you? ¿Cuánto tiempo?
Oh.
De 10 a 20 años.
From 10 to 20 years.
Por un cigarro.
For one joint.
Oh. Fuck that.
For one joint.
Por un cigarro.
Oof. Uno.
do we make our pillow shape of a cube? I'll tell you. The problem with pillows is that you're trying to fit a round peg into a square hole.
You can't get equality among people born to the same parents and raised under the same roof. How in the world would you think you're going to get it among people who've had such different histories and cultures around the world?
So there's a big difference between equality and equity. Equality suggests, oh, everyone should get the same amount. The problem with that, not everybody's starting out from the same place. So if we're all getting the same amount, but you started out back there and I started out over here, we can get the same amount, but you're still going to be that far back behind me.
Well, this is one of any number of one-factor explanations as to why everyone doesn't have the same outcome. 100 years ago, it was genetics. At other times and places, it was exploitation. But again, these are ideas that sound plausible. But when you do research, you discover that everywhere you turn, there are 1,000 reasons why people don't turn out the same. It goes right down to the family. In the first chapter of this book, I point out that the firstborn has higher IQs than his siblings, and in later life has more achievements. Among astronauts, for example, of the 29 astronauts in the Apollo program that put a man on the moon, 22 were either the firstborn or an only child. Now, if you can't get equality among people born to the same parents and raised under the same roof, why in the world would you think you're going to get it among people who've had such different histories and cultures around the world?
Almost nowhere, anywhere in the world, or in any period of history, do you find any society in which groups that compete openly end up with the same results.
You continue to hear politicians using statistics, sort of cherry-picking statistics in order to form economic policies where the government gets directly involved. They always do it under the guise of social justice. Like anything that is led by the phrase social justice can be accepted by these people.
Yes, and I guess one of the crucial assumptions of the social justice literature is that in the absence of bias, people would be similar, but they're not similar. They're not demographically similar. I mean, for example, the median age of Jewish Americans, Mormons, and Japanese Americans is around 50. There's no way they're going to be equally represented in proportion to their proportion of the society in the National Football League. I mean, 50-year-olds are not going to be able to compete with people in their 20s.
I can come up with umpteen different examples of this disparities in various situations, including situations where it is not possible for it to be either discrimination or genetics. People on the other side can give you one example. You can read reams of paper by advocates of social justice and not find one example anywhere in the world. There are people who run international studies. Rodel, I quote, the French historian, he said, in no society has all parts of the population had the same outcome.
About giving people the resources and the support they need so that everyone can be on equal footing and then compete on equal footing. Equitable treatment means we all end up at the same place.
Are goals like economic equality or economic opportunity
racial equality, are those good goals for a nation?
If you mean by equality, equality of opportunity, yes. If you mean any belief that you're going to get the same end results, the answer is no. What those kinds of goals do is simply tear a society apart, often making all the groups in it worse off they would have been otherwise. It's sad, affirmative action in academia, for example, takes minority students and mismatches them with institutions. For example, when I was at Cornell, the average black student enrolled at Cornell at that time scored at the 75th percentile on the SATs. The average white student in liberal arts at Cornell at that time scored at the 99th percentile. Half the black students were on academic probation. In other words, you had kids who would have been on the dean's list at most of the colleges in this country, but they were sent to colleges where they were virtually guaranteed not to make it.
When you talk about cosmic justice in intellectuals and race, what do you mean by that?
I guess I mean what some people mean by social justice, which is a justice for groups, an initial opportunity to have the same life chances. But I call it cosmic justice because no society is able to do that or has ever done that in any country. And so what you're asking for is for the whole, for life chances to be the same. When you think of all the differences, it's virtually impossible. You know, some kids are maybe raised in families that are the same economic level, but one family will have one set of attitudes toward education, and the other will not. And the one who's in the family that does not have that same attitude, he may be a fine fellow, he may be bright, all of that. He doesn't have the same chance. There's almost no way he could have the same chance.
Why is this misused? Is it because so often these statistics, in order to force these economic policies that don't work, is it because politicians extend their term in office? Is it because of the party industry, if you will, that exists? What do you think motivates people to do these things that clearly are not benefiting our society or our economy?
Well, these are things that are benefiting them. Politicians stay in office by saying things that people want to hear and by not accepting evidence that shows that they've gone wrong.
Obama, BA, Columbia University, JD, Harvard Law School, instructor in constitutional law, the University of Chicago. Are you impressed? Our guest today, Thomas Sowell, is not. Uncommon Knowledge, now. Welcome to Uncommon Knowledge. I'm Peter Robinson. Be sure to visit us on our website at hoover.org/UK or on Facebook at facebook.com/UNC-knowledge. Facebook.com/UNC-knowledge. A fellow at the Hoover Institution, economist Dr. Thomas Sowell is the author of more than 24 books, including the classic work, A Conflict of Visions. Dr. Sowell's latest, Intellectuals and Society, a revised and expanded version of the original bestseller. Tom Sowell, welcome. Segment 1, what's wrong with the intellectuals? Tom, 2 quotations. Writing in 1981, historian Arthur Schlesinger Jr., who attended Phillips Exeter and Harvard and held positions as a professor at Harvard and later at the City University of New York. Arthur Schlesinger Jr., quote, "Those in the U.S. who think the Soviet Union is on the verge of economic and social collapse are only kidding themselves," close quote. Quotation number 2. Speaking in 1982, only months after Arthur Schlesinger Jr., Ronald Reagan, a graduate of Eureka College.
In ironic sense, Karl Marx was right. We are witnessing today a great revolutionary crisis, a crisis where the demands of the economic order are conflicting directly with those of the political order. But the crisis is happening not in the free, non-Marxist West, but in the home of Marxist-Leninism, the Soviet Union. It is the Soviet Union that runs against the tide of history by denying human freedom and human dignity to its citizens. It also is in deep economic difficulty.
Tom, professional, exquisitely educated intellectual Arthur Schlesinger Jr. got it wrong. And Ronald Reagan, the graduate of a little school in the middle of the country, Eureka College, got it right. A decade after these two quotations, the Soviet Union went out of existence. How come?
Well, Arthur Schlesinger is part of a long and one might say distinguished line of people who have been absolutely wrong for decades and actually for centuries. So this is just one of many statements that you could quote. It's not even the only time that Arthur Schlesinger Jr. was wrong by miles. He was wrong in attributing the coverage from the Great Depression to Franklin D. Roosevelt. He was the tax cuts we're going to make under Andrew Mellon. We're going to make it harder to balance the budget. They not only balanced the budgets, they had a surplus and it down the national debt.
And even after John Kennedy's tax cuts, Treasury Secretary Andrew Mellon.
Well, no, Andrew Mellon was earlier.
But
in writing retrospectively about it, he said that Mellon was very inconsistent in saying he wanted to reduce the national debt while cutting the tax rate.
Right.
Well, he cut the tax rate, but the tax revenues increased.
So Arthur Schlesinger was wrong about the tax cuts of the 20s.
Yes.
And then when he served in the Kennedy White House, he resisted those tax cuts, which also worked. And then he opposed Ronald Reagan's. He was wrong 3 times. So what is the pathology of intellectuals that? I mean, one condensation, unfair, crude condensation, but it sort of gets at a point that this book might be simply the fancier your education, the more likely you are to be wrong.
Well, the more I would say there's something to that, because the more likely you are to spout off about things you don't know anything about. The problem is that all of us have a narrow range within which we may be great, but a few steps outside that range, we're totally lost. Bobby Fischer didn't go around commenting, on theories of evolution and stuff like that. He was happy to play chess. But intellectuals, someone who's a linguist like Noam Chomsky, he didn't stick to linguistics. If he stuck to linguistics, most people would never have heard of it.
So somehow or other, fancy education seems to give people the feeling that they have been given the diploma, gives them permission to spout off about world affairs, politics, economics, when all they know is linguistics, or Arthur Schlesinger Jr.'s case, he knows a lot about the administration of Andrew Jackson,
yes.
150 years before. Why? What is it about having a fancy diploma that gives people the right
It's not only a diploma, it's all just a general reputation of being an intellectual. You don't have to go that far away. I mean, a couple of years ago, there was a mountain lion killed here in Palo Alto. And all kinds of insane things were said by people at Stanford and whatnot about how terrible it was to kill this mountain lion. He was up in a tree near where the school was
about to let out.
Yeah.
The cops had been watching it all day. It was in a tree in a neighborhood, and when the school was about to let out, they thought we had no choice.
And people who may have been, they may have been the world's authorities on existentialism or Mayan culture or whatever, they know nothing about mountain lions, and the cops have had to deal with this before. And they do know something about mountain lions.
Opposing social visions. Intellectuals in society, quote, at the heart of the social vision prevalent among contemporary intellectuals is the belief that there are problems and solutions.
Yes.
Close quote. Explain that.
Well, the people with the vision of the anointed, as I call it, believe there are solutions, and the intellectuals have the inside track in providing those solutions. Those with the opposite vision understand there are no solutions. There are trade-offs. And, you can make this a little bit better by making something a little bit worse. Or you can make it a little bit better by making something a lot worse. And right now, for example, this mania for high-speed rail, there's no question that if you're willing to pour enough money down the rat hole, we can have high-speed rail.
We can have it.
And they have it in Spain. One of the economics professors in Spain said, not only are they not covering the operating costs, there's not been $1
collected towards the infrastructure. I mean, like the rails and the trains, they haven't got $1 to pay for that. They're not even covering the cost of running the trains on a daily basis, you know, the conductors and the electricity.
So you've got, in Intellectuals in Society, you draw this contrast between what you call the vision of the anointed, we the anointed, because of our intellect, our superior, I'm denigrating the view because I share your view that it's all nonsense, but it's not nonsense to them. So what's the fair way to put it? What is it?
They have more knowledge than other people.
We know more than most people.
That's right.
Therefore, we are in a position to survey society, see specific problems, and propose solutions. That's one fundamental vision which runs through much of Western civilization, as you demonstrate here. And the opposing vision is commonsensical, tragic. You can't solve certain problems, we will all die. There is human beings are in some ways perverse. This would be the vision you argue with the founding fathers. You check ambition with ambition. Checks and balances. Power is dangerous. So why is it, if you've got these two fundamental visions, the vision of the anointed and the tragic vision of life, and they run through much of Western civilization, why is it the vision of the anointed that is the
free markets? What about all the people who want to have social justice? People just go out there, they make whatever deals they can with each other, work things out, and go on their way. And here is all this unused brilliance standing on the sideline, watching with impotent rage.
The tragic vision confines intellectuals to the classroom. The vision of the anointed lets them run society. That's the difference?
Roughly. So,
what you're saying is that it's just human pride. It's the kind of vulgar urge to power.
Oh, absolutely.
And nothing more than that.
Well, that's sufficient for many things.
Oh, all right. Segment 2, the role of intellectuals in American life. Intellectuals in society. Quote, there has probably never been an era in history when intellectuals have played a larger role in society than the era in which we live. Close quote. How?
Well, for one thing, for most of history, you had autocratic governments. You had kings, you had emperors, and so on. And what the people thought didn't matter an awful lot. In a democracy, what the people think matters a lot. And so, and also in later times, you have a more prosperous society where we can afford, from a financial point of view, to send more and more people to colleges and universities and support books and things like that, much more so than in the past. And now you have people out there who fundamentally don't really know much beyond what their specialty might be, creating a certain vision of life in the electorate, which the people, the holders of power, have to take into account.
So the intellectuals are able to dominate, perhaps is the word, the climate of opinion.
Yes.
In a republic of 300 million people.
Yes, and well, a classic example was the era between the two world wars, where the intellectuals were all in favor of disarmament. Even while Hitler was arming Germany and when Japan was arming and so forth, they were saying we should disband the RAF, British intellectuals, and so on. And it was not that they convinced the holders of power. The holders of power understood that Germany was rearming secretly, even before Hitler took power.
You make this point, Stanley Baldwin, then the British Prime Minister, saw what Hitler was up to.
Oh, yeah, the British and French intelligence services both knew this. The public didn't know this. And Baldwin was not about to tell the British public that Germany was rearming, because the clear implication was that Britain must rearm. And the intellectuals had made rearmament, poison politically.
And his professional opinion as a working politician was that the climate of opinion was such that British democracy couldn't bear the truth.
That's right.
Because of what the intellectuals had done through journals and newspapers and the chattering classes, so to speak. And what about Vietnam? Lyndon Johnson.
Oh my gosh, that the Tet Offensive was hailed by the intellectuals as a huge defeat for the American military forces. After the communists won the war, took over South Vietnam.
Tet Offensive is 68, but the communists finally win in 73.
Yeah. The communist leaders themselves said they were devastated by the Tet Offensive. They never won a military battle against American forces the whole time the Vietnam War went on. But in the newspapers, the Tet Offensive was depicted as a great defeat for the United States.
So Lyndon Johnson and the military conducting the war in Vietnam knew that we had, in effect, that we had won. In effect, won. That we had won that engagement. The Tet Offensive.
Oh, and the communists knew.
Everybody knew except the intellectuals.
Everybody.
And Lyndon Johnson, instead of prosecuting the war, is forced to announce toward the end of 1968 that he is not going to run for re-election. That's the moment when America effectively surrenders in Vietnam.
Yes.
Because the climate of opinion because the intellectuals got things wrong.
They dominated the climate of opinion. And that if, in a democracy, if the people believe the war is unwinnable, then it's unwinnable.
Intellectuals in society. Ideological differences based on beliefs about facts, causation, human nature, and the character and distribution of knowledge are ultimately questioned about different perceptions of the real world, leading to hypotheses which can be tested empirically. Close quote. Now, everybody who's been to college and high school knows that what you just described is the intellectual method. You come up with a hypothesis and you test it against reality. And yet you argue here that the least interested in actual empirical tests, testing ideas against reality, are intellectuals.
Because there are many talents. They have a huge ego stake in a given set of conclusions. In other words, it's very asymmetrical. I mean, if you believe in free markets and traditional values and so forth, there is no exaltation that comes with that. You're just somebody who believes in free markets and traditional values.
On the contrary, there's a certain humility that comes with it.
Yes.
The market knows more than I do.
Yes.
The traditional moral wisdom of the ages knows more than I do. You humble yourself before the wider world, right?
Yes.
Okay.
But if you believe in social justice and saving the environment, I mean, you are really something. And so the people with that viewpoint have a huge ego stake. And empirical evidence is like gambling all of that on a roll of the dice.
Okay. They don't want to test for fear that they might be proven wrong.
Yeah.
They don't want to know the answer. Again, intellectuals in society, quote, intellectuals on issues ranging across the spectrum, from house policies to laws governing organ transplants, have sought to have decision-making discretion taken from those directly involved, who have personal knowledge and a personal stake, and transferred to third parties who have neither, and who pay no price for being wrong. Close quote. So again, this counter common sense. You know what best for your health, therefore we must make the decision in a bureaucracy in Washington.
That's right.
How?
Well, you've been told all your life, and many of these people have, from an early age, they were in the class for bright, gifted children. They were the ones who got into the good high schools. They were the ones who were accepted in colleges that accept less than 10% of the applicants. They've heard this all through their lives. And after a while, they must, in all due modesty, believe it.
The percentage of cabinet appointments with experience in the private sector. The administration of Dwight Eisenhower, almost 60%. George W. Bush, over 50%. Barack Obama, barely 20%.
Yeah.
What are we to make of this?
That there is a reason why things have declined the way they have. That people of that sort have a track record. I remember years ago encountering a fellow who had been a teaching fellow at Harvard when I was an undergraduate. And I said to him, I've been noticing that whenever there's a great disaster, there always seems to be a Harvard man in the middle of it. He said, have you noticed that too? I mean, think of McNamara and the whiz kids in the Vietnam War. Think of the Ford Foundation. Who was the Harvard man in charge of that? I think it was Bundy.
Sounds right.
Yeah, and he launched this whole notion of subsidizing community activists as the answer to the racial problem. Of course, community activists have every incentive to exacerbate the problem to the fullest. I mean, gone would be the end of their job.
So, why? I'm just still trying to get at this contrast between the growing role of intellectuals in American life, which is taking place not only in our lifetime, but in the lifetime of somebody who's in college this very day. You can see it expanding over the last quarter of a century or so. Why should that be taking place now? Why should intellectuals have a growing role, and why should the nature of intellectuals have changed? If you look at the founders, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, quite different characters and temperaments. These were both extremely well read. John Adams was a Harvard man, and yet you don't get what you get. I would argue, and I think you'd agree, but I put it to you, you get the sense over and over again, particularly in Adams. You get it in Washington. You certainly get it in the constitutional debates. It's the tragic vision of life.
Oh, no question.
Power is dangerous. We need to end this in. We need to devolve as much power as we can to ordinary people. Now, why is it that the founders should have grasped that, and intellectuals today just don't see it at all?
Well, first of all, these people did not make their living as intellectuals. They did not make their living even as politicians, most of them. Most of them had day jobs, and when the rebellion against Britain started, they put that aside for the time being to go into politics and try to write the Constitution and all those kinds of things. But they were not intellectuals in the sense in which I define it as people who earn their living by producing a final product which is simply ideas.
Segment 3, intellectuals condescending. Intellectuals in society, quote, intellectuals give people who have the handicap of poverty the further handicap of a sense of victimhood.
Yes.
Close quote. Explain that to me.
Intellectuals have a great tendency to see poverty as a great moral problem to which they have a solution. Now, faith began in poverty. So there's no mysterious explanation of why some people are poor. The question is, why have some people gotten prosperous? And in particular, why have some gotten prosperous to a greater degree than others? But everybody started poor. But poverty is not a mystery to be solved by intellectuals. More than that, I think one of the things I wish I put more emphasis on in the book is that intellectuals have no interest in what creates wealth and what inhibits the creation of wealth. They are very concerned about the distribution of it, but they act as if wealth just exists somehow. And it's only a question, it's like manna from heaven. It's only a question of how we split it up.
And why should that be? Why shouldn't they find that question at least intellectually fascinating?
Because it would destroy the whole vision that they have.
Because it would lead to the answer of free markets.
Well, it would say there are enormous numbers of reasons why people acquire the ability to create wealth. And they vary all over the world. And so if you find, for example, that in centuries past, Germans living in Eastern Europe had much higher standards of living than the indigenous peoples of Eastern Europe, intellectuals would say, well, the Germans have somehow oppressed the people of Eastern Europe.
Right.
Or the ones who were into genetic determinism would say the Germans were born biologically superior to the people of Eastern Europe. But anyone with a knowledge of history would know that there are all kinds of reasons why Western Europe as a whole has far greater wealth producing capacity than Eastern Europe. But of course, that wouldn't cut out the role of intellectuals. They would then have to do what David Hume did, which is what he urged this fellow 18th century Scots to learn the English language, because that would open up a whole world to them that they would not have otherwise.
Which leads to another quotation that I found very striking here, Tom, in Intellectuals in Society. Part of this you touched on. You write that although intellectuals pay a lot of attention to inequalities among racial and ethnic groups, quote, seldom has this attention been directed toward how the less economically successful might improve themselves by availing themselves of the culture of others around them, close quote. Now that is a very arresting formulation. Poor people can improve themselves by availing themselves of the culture of others around them. What do you mean by that?
I mean that the same things which allow some other people to prosper can allow them to prosper if they take advantage of those same things. The Scots were a classic example. They were one of the poorest and most ignorant people on the fringes of European civilization in centuries past. But once they, for whatever reason, began to educate themselves, and especially to learn the English language, which became a passion. People all over Scotland, including Hume himself, were taking lessons in the English language.
Hume's first language was Gaelic?
I don't know if it was Gaelic, it was whatever.
They spoke in those days. All right.
Yeah, and from about the middle of the 18th century to the middle of the 19th century, the leading intellectuals in Britain were Scots. I mean, you had Adam Smith in economics, Hume's in human philosophy, Locke in history. You go through the whole list, and so they could do that. But that was an extremely rare thing for an intellectual to say. Most intellectuals in most countries around the world see the issue as how those who are more prosperous should be brought down, rather than how, and moreover, that the people who are lagging should cling to their culture. I don't know how you're going to keep on doing what you've always done and get results that are different from what you've always gotten.
Two quotations, Tom. An editorial in the New York Times. Quote, racial stereotypes still wreak havoc with the job possibilities of young black men. Close quote. Quotation number 2, Thomas Sowell in Intellectuals and Society. Quote, black unemployment rates were lower than those of whites as long ago as 1890. Close quote.
And in 1930 as well.
And in 1930. First of all, black unemployment was lower decades ago, before the Civil Rights Movement, before the New York Times began editorializing on black poverty. How can that have been?
It shows among other, well, the minimum wage law is one huge factor. 1930 was also the last year when there was no federal minimum wage law. If you look at the unemployment rate of black teenagers in 1948, 1949, it is a fraction of what it has been in any of recent decades. And 1949 was a recession year, so the black teenage unemployment rate in 1949 was a fraction of what it was in even the most prosperous years of the 1990s.
And this is because the federal minimum wage said you must pay every worker at least this much.
Yes.
And when there was no minimum wage, kids, everybody, but particularly you're talking now about black teens, could get paid
whatever.
$1.50 an hour.
See, the other thing,
but they could get employment. They could start learning skills. They could reach the fish rung on the ladder, so to speak.
Yes. And people move up very quickly. I mean, McDonald's has over 100% turnover a year. People say he's out flipping hamburgers. Yes, he's flipping hamburgers in January. Does not mean he's going to be flipping hamburgers in December. Somewhere.
How to get to work on time. How to get a,
that's right. And he's not going to be. He's going to start up the ladder. What was different about the late 1940s was the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938 specified what the minimum wage would be. The runaway inflation of the 1940s made that number meaningless. So for all practical purposes, inflation had repealed the minimum wage law. Thank God I was a teenager in those years. And you know, when I started out my first full-time job as a Western Union messenger, my starting pay was 50% above the federal minimum wage, because inflation had made the federal minimum wage meaningless. And so under those conditions, 1948, black 16 and 17-year-olds had an unemployment rate under 10%, and slightly less than that of white teenagers the same age. Now as you come in, and the liberals say, no, we've got to catch up with inflation. Starting in 1950, they escalated the minimum wage regularly, and then you began to see these horrendous rates of unemployment among black teenagers.
Diversity. Again, I'm quoting from Intellectuals in Society, quote, sweeping claims for the benefits of diversity in individual institutions to prevail without a speck of evidence being asked for or given, close quote.
Yeah.
Again, how come? Intellectuals ought to be asking. So we have diversity, we have affirmative action, diversity. Of course, diversity is one of the sacred words of the academy these days. And nobody's tested to see whether diversity enriches the educate.
It's just definitional. Intellectuals have many skills which will enable them to evade the testing of what they believe. And that negates the fact that they are capable of testing it doesn't mean that they're going to test it.
Thomas Sowell once again, quote, at the same time you're getting all this mouthing of diversity, this is not from Intellectuals in Society, but it's from an interview you gave elsewhere. At the same time you're getting all this mouthing of diversity, there's an extremely narrow ideological conformity that's being enforced. So we have diversity in the way people look, the ethnic groups or from which they come, the parts of the country from which they come. But once you arrive, you better start thinking the way we do.
Yeah. I still have emails from students, who say that, when they raise any issues that go against the professor's ideology, they just get ridiculed.
Segment 4, Thomas Sowell, intellectual. We've just learned that you started out as delivering telegrams. This was in New York. This was when you were living in Harlem. So you started out delivering. Now let's take you to age 24, when you were at Howard University. You write in another book, well worth reading. They're all worth reading, but I love A Personal Odyssey. I'm quoting from A Personal Odyssey in the case. Quote, I was a 24-year-old high school dropout with mediocre grades in a mediocre institution. Close quote. When did that change? When did your own intellect become engaged? When did the light bulb go on?
Oh, before then, but of course I was working during the day and going to school at night, which is not the ideal position for intellectual results. So I really didn't have the results.
So how did young Tom Sowell? What I can recall, you were telling me that you would wait up at night, as I believed it this when you were a teen. You'd wait up at night for the early morning edition newspapers to come out. You'd walk up the block at a little after midnight, and buy the first edition newspapers at the newsstand, take them back to your bedroom and read them.
Yes.
So you were an intellectual when you were.
I'm not sure that reading the Yankee scores made you an intellectual.
Oh, it was the Yankee scores. I feel so much better now. I thought you were engaged in world. I've always thought, Tom.
Can you imagine anybody in Harlem doing that today?
Walking around at midnight freely and without a
and
kid.
as a small old white man had a little newsstand in Harlem, and he obviously had enough people doing this to make it worth his while to be open at midnight. And I would walk down this long block, get my newspapers, and come on back home and read it. A different world.
Quote, again from A Personal Odyssey. I graduated Harvard magna cum laude, economics, and Karl Marx had a lot to do with it. Karl Marx got Tom Sowell through Harvard. Explain yourself.
Well, I have been taken by the Marxist philosophy. And therefore, I've done a lot of studying. I'm one of the few people, I guess, who's read all 3 volumes of Capital and indexed them as I went. And from this, I wrote
This reading takes place before you to Harvard.
I started, but at Harvard, I'm not sure it was Capital. And that then provided me with an undergraduate honors thesis. And the honors thesis got the magna cum laude. The grade point average was just enough to make me eligible.
I see. And you enjoyed yourself at Harvard and have revered that august institution ever since. Is that correct?
Not quite. I have never gone to a class reunion at Harvard. Even when I was teaching at Brandeis, which is about a 20-minute drive from Harvard. What I saw there that bothered me, what bothered me ever since, there was the sense that we don't really need to test for evidence. If all we bright, good fellows all believe this, it should be true.
So you got the sense,
and
you have a sense of kind of intellectual priesthood or caste.
Yes, and the same that you mentioned from the book, that there is this sense that you don't really have to go for evidence. That, these are things that we all know.
Thinking is so makes it so. From Harvard to a graduate program in economics at the University of Chicago, quote, I was as well aware that the University of Chicago Economics Department had a reputation for conservatism as they were that I was a Marxist. What made this not matter, both devoted to intellectual standards, I developed much more respect for the University of Chicago than I ever had for Harvard. Close quote.
Yes.
Explain the difference in atmosphere, intellectual atmosphere.
Well, in Chicago, you had to make your arguments. As somebody Thomas once said, at Chicago, economics is a full contact sport. And I don't know if you're aware of the back and forth that goes on in the sphere. But the fact of the matter is that everyone recognizes you have to have facts, you have to have logic. You can't say that we believe because everybody knows this. No, you've got to show how and why.
And you write about someone who became your close friend, Milton Friedman. You studied with Milton Friedman. Now, so here's a case, Tom. Your thesis of intellectuals in society, that an intellectual is someone whose end product is ideas. Milton's end product was ideas, and yet he resisted all the temptations that you delineate in this book. He championed the free markets, was intensely suspicious of the self-aggrandizement of intellectuals. He loathed Washington. In fact, there was, I can recall some conversation, never went anywhere, but some conversation here at the Hoover Institution that we should move to Washington, and Milton said it would last 2 years and intellectually we would be taken over. How did he, in strict terms, a man of ideas, and in that sense, an intellectual is intellectual, what set him apart? What made him different from the intellectuals in the majority?
Well, in the preface of the book, I explain that I don't go into that. I'm not trying to. I did not try to explain every sparrow's fall. I'm trying to find what are the general patterns that we can see looking at intellectuals over the past 2 centuries.
Oh, she turned.
And I specifically say Milton Friedman was a classic example of someone who did not do it that way. Although I will, Milton himself somewhere pointed out that at a very early period in his life he was changing. He was certainly a liberal.
Okay,
but he moved beyond that, and a lot of people do. I would say most of the conservative intellectuals were at some point in their lives on the left. I mean, Hayek was a socialist. You can just go through the whole list of them. I mean, there are a few like William F. Buckley, who was a conservative from day one, but he was the exception, not the rule.
All right, so if you won't explain the sparrow's fall in Milton's case, explain it in yours. We've now got you to a graduate program at the University of Chicago.
You close the door?
Marxist. Yeah. What were the circumstances? What was the intellectual journey that led you to reject Marx?
Well, it was not taking Milton Friedman's. I was a Marxist when I went into Milton Friedman's course. I was a Marxist when I came out.
You are just one tough Marxist. Anybody could resist Milton. So what happened, Tom?
I went to work for the government as a summer intern in economics. And seeing the thinking or lack of thinking that was going on in the government, I realized the government is not where it's at.
So this ties back to the notion of empiricism, when you actually bumped up against the reality of the professional intellectual caste attempting to rearrange the lives of millions of people across this republic, you said to yourself, it's mediocre, it's second rate. What was it that you...
It was truly unthinking. It was also something else. The Labor Department had its own institutional interests. I was interested, for example, in whether the minimum wage law caused unemployment. And as I tried to come up with ways of testing that, I realized that the people in the Labor Department saw that as a threat. I mean, they were appalled as I gave some way we might try to test this. Because they had no desire to test the minimum wage law, which provided 1/3 of the funding for the U.S. Department of Labor. And so once you say the government agencies have their own institutional interests, so don't look for them to serve the interests of others. I mean, to me, the question is, are all these teenage kids going to go without jobs and end up on the street in crime and all the rest of it? That was not their top priority. And I realized other people's well-being would never be the priority of politicians and bureaucrats.
All right, after you leave government service in Washington, you go back to academia, where you've had a long and extremely distinguished career. You've taught at institutions that include Amherst, and Cornell, and UCLA. You've been a fellow at the Hoover Institution at Stanford University for some 3 decades now. And yet, you spent this time swimming, so to speak, against that tide, the intellectual tide that you describe here. I'm just probing one more time, and feel perfectly free to swap me down one more time if you'd like. What made you different, Tom? What is it in your character, your background? What permitted you to resist these temptations, to see them in the first place?
Well, like others, I did not successfully resist them at first, but as time went on and more evidence accumulated, I wasn't as prepared as some others were to just keep explaining away all the evidence.
So it's your impulse toward empiricism. Let's
Yes,
test it,
yes.
let's test it, let's test it.
Yes.
All right. Segment 5, our intellectual in chief. Barack Obama got his BA from Columbia, his JD from Harvard. He taught for a number of years at the University of Chicago Law School. May I suppose that Tom Sowell is duly impressed?
You might say the road to hell is paved with Ivy League degrees.
All right. A few clips of the President of the United States delivering his State of the Union address earlier this year. Clip number 1.
Higher education can't be a luxury. It is an economic imperative that every family in America should be able to afford.
Higher education, an imperative. All he's asking is that all young Americans should have the same opportunity to get a really good education that Tom Sowell had. Tom?
I love the way the use of the word opportunity. You know, I had as much opportunity to become an NBA star as Michael Jordan had. It just happens that there was some difference in skill. And so the same thing with education. There is no point trying to run people through institutions that they have very little interest in, and that they may not be suited for. In fact, I would argue that one of the problems of American education is you have a lot of people in college who have no interest in what college is supposed to be, nor is there any reason why they should.
And so
So you water down the education of the people who are there to get an education because of the people who are not there for that purpose.